Hi guys, welcome. I'm Brian, and I'm going to show you the Datamart Studio today in Actito. Why exactly? Well, it's actually one of the most fundamental things that you're going to use in a customer activation strategy. You're dealing with thousands of customers, millions of customers maybe, all being their individual self, having their own typical information, and you as a marketer need to make audiences of that, make sense of that, personalize to them. So you're gonna need data for that. One of the most biggest hurdles that you face as a marketer is probably also data. So just to give you an idea, I want to show you how we fixed this in Actito, how we can make it as accessible as possible for you to start working on targetings and personalizations and such. First of all, let's navigate to the Datamart Studio, which you can find on the left-hand side. That's the easiest way, I'd say. And then you'll see a nice overview of your customer data. So this is already one of the first steps that we've taken. Data is something very abstract for most people. It's somewhere in the cloud on servers, and it's hard to get a grasp on what you actually have and what you know about your customers. So enter the Datamart Studio. What you see here is a multi-table view of your customers. So it gives you a good idea of what you have on customers, such as classic information like an email address, a first name, a physical address, a customer type, any type of data that you deem relevant for your customers, you can keep in there. So if you want to add something as well, that is something that you can do in Actito as well. As soon as you want to start polling people for their favorite food, their favorite dish, well, you can add that as an attribute and start asking people what their favorite food is. And so to do so, you have a nice array of channels. Actito is multi-channel. We can plug in other channels that you like as well. But so the ones that you can find in Actito standardly is so email, SMS, forms and pages. You can do print campaigns and call centers. So just to give you an example, we've talked about the favorite dish. Well, I could build an email, incorporate a form in that, ask people about their favorite food, they can answer, and then that gets filled into the purple table, into the Datamart Studio, so I can have that information and start getting this nice flow of having those interactions with my customers, getting that data from it, and advancing the customer relationship I'm building with them. So my favorite part actually here is the right hand side. So you can see these purple tables, and they are actually data that you can pull in from external sources. I'm talking about we can plug in web shops, for example, cash register systems, parcel systems. If you have loyalty information on your customers that you want to keep, any specific type of data that you can keep from external systems is being pulled into purple tables and are available for you to leverage to the fullest. So for example, event data, if I'm linked with an Eventbrite, for example, I can have all sorts of information on that and start personalizing on that. Have a confirmation email, a reminder email, share location again of the venue and so on in due time every time. Now, the flexibility of Actito allows you again to add new purple tables. So if you see that there's something else that you want to plug in, some new system that you're using that has really relevant information for you, we plug it in, build a purple table, and then you can start using that in your campaigns as well. Now, having all that data is a nice thing. And as you can see, this is a retail example. There's plenty of configurations that you can actually build in telecom, for example, media, pharma, travel. There's tons of things that you can do. This is a really tailor-made 360-degree customer view, and you have so the full liberty to use that data. And I'm saying using because this is where we collect it. But of course, if we're talking to millions of people, so thousands of people, then you need to make sense of that data as well. So I'm just going to take you to one of my favorite profiles. Conveniently, we've named him Mr. Perfect. So here he is. And let's have a look at his profile. How we make sense of Mr. Perfect and everything that fits the persona that we've built around him, that fits his type of behavior, how we can make sense of all that. And the first way to do so is the engagement score. So I'm seeing that Mr. Perfect has a low engagement. He's not being, he hasn't opened a lot of his emails lately or SMSs. He hasn't visited the website a lot. So this already is something that I can use in my customer activation strategy to reactivate Mr. Perfect and make sure that I don't lose him as a customer. Now, first, what you can see here are the things that we saw in the central table. So the central blue table, I have address information, contact details, purchase history. Those are some general attributes regarding purchase history, and some technical data as well, such as devices being used and so on. Now, my favorite part in this section is segmentations, because segmentations is really the way that you're going to start making sense of your customers. I'm going to divide this big chunk of data, this huge amount of people information, in different groups. And as soon as someone fits a certain description, they're going to enter that segment, and I can start doing all sorts of things with that. To give you an example, age group. I can start looking at birth date, for example, and see to what age group that person belongs. As soon as that person ages beyond the scope of a certain segment level, then Actito can use that change of segments. So imagine Mr. Perfect has now aged to above 60, then he will migrate from segment, for example, and I can use that for a trigger to start sending relevant information for seniors, for example, to ask about his preferences, for example, because you're entering a new life stage, maybe your interests have changed as well. So those kind of things are a starter, let's say. But also, this is something that you can define yourself in a way that, for example, frequency is something very relevant. How often do my customers stop by? That can depend on your business, of course. Is it normal for you to see a customer every 2 days? Is a high frequency for you twice a week or once a year? That is something that you can define yourself. And again, as soon as I see a customer that typically comes 3 times a week to my business and suddenly only comes once a week, well, that might be again a trigger to start reactivation, or vice versa. If I see an elevated frequency, then I might reward those people and encourage the behavior that they're showing. Segmentations, a first great way, non-technical way to start making sense of all that customer data. Another one that I want to show you is subscriptions. Subscriptions is opt-ins, where you would typically, with the MailChimp or an email service provider, have multiple lists per opt-in, duplicate profiles, a lot of different types of information on one profile scattered around different files. That is something that you avoid in Actito. So you have one single profile with multiple opt-ins, and it's way easier for you again to, if someone wants to unsubscribe completely, wants to be retracted from your database, it's one single profile that you remove. And again, you can start doing cross-selling with your subscriptions as well, since you have that, again, that one single customer view, right? And one single customer view, just to give you an idea, I'm going to show you the interactions tab as well. This is a nice part because it really sums up all the interactions that you've had with a customer that are kept in Actito. So as you can see, there's been a bit of interactions on opt-ins. So Mr. Perfect has unsubscribed for promotions and weekend updates, and then resubscribed again to promotions on the same moment. So he might have changed his mind last minute. Received a couple of emails, made some orders, and I can filter on these as well to make sure that I get the relevant information I need, with a bit of details as well. So I see an unsubscription here. I want to get my unsubscription details. I can check those as well, right? So, okay, we have all that data. We can divide them up into different groups and so on. Now I want to make sure that I can build audiences on this as well. So how do we go about that? Well, I can take it to manage profiles for this one. And then I choose my database. Let's stick to retail for this one. And then I can use the targeting module. The targeting module, again, is a way of making data way more accessible. Typically, if you're dealing with a multi-table model, a lot of solutions will require you to use SQL, for example, which tends to get more technical. And especially if you want to do crazy things, well, you need to be proficient in SQL, which is something very technical for people that aren't as technical as a typical marketer. So we made that visual as well again. So I can target based on gender. So I can use anything that we saw in the central table. I can just take all men, for example, and only those that are belonging to a certain segment. I want them in a certain age group. So let's select all men between 35 and 45. And that's just a start. I want to go way further. And as you've seen, I have all that different information in my table, so I can start using information from my abandoned baskets. So I could say the total amount of abandoned baskets this person has, or the average amount of rows on an abandoned basket, for example, typically exceeds 2 products. So that means they typically have a substantial abandoned basket when they leave. But those could be interesting for me as well. And then I can still go into interaction history as well. I can go into goals, for example, for web visits. I could go into the email history, for example. So there's a lot of things that I can use, in which scenarios they have been enrolled, for example, have they received a print campaign, call center campaign, and so on, to really start diving into details and go into an acupuncturistic way almost to that perfect audience to send my message to. So I'd say explore the targeting, explore your Datamart Studio, get a good grasp of what you have in terms of data so that you know how you can activate your customers, make that reflection on what do I actually need, what could I add, and how could I translate that to meaningful personalization. So that concludes our first video. I'd say stay tuned for the next ones. We'll definitely dive into how you can use your data further as we're going more into the practice of customer activation. Thanks a lot. See you for the next one.